Rodrigo, it's wonderful to have you in the show.
And try to figure out like if the company use this service, what could I get from here to get the data? Like because the data mostly will be in the same place, but I just try to figure out different. That's why I start to look on this or try this kind of approach. Like let's see, like okay, let's be like more pessimist, like and see like the other part that nobody is looking for, because probably there is some opportunities, maybe not, but maybe yeah. And there is a nice research from Noah from Hermetic, and that he talks a lot about pass role, because like when an action has a pass role, it probably could be more dangerous. I think the easiest conditional, and it's where it's very effective, it's like the IP source. And so like you could use this key with this policy, like, but you should be from my VPN or from my bastion host or somewhere else, because like if the key is leaked, because the key will leak sometimes, right? And if the key leaks, you at least they could not use that, because like they need to be from that source IP. And so like you lose the game, but you win the championship because they are not going to use it.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into our Scale to Zero show. I'm Purushottam, co founder and CTO of Cloudanix. Today, I'm excited to talk about like threat detection, threat research in the AWS or in general cloud land. And to discuss on that, we have a special guest, Rodrigo Montoro. Rodrigo is the head of threat detection research at Calvis Security and has more than 22 years of experience in IT and computer security in general. For most of his career, he has been working in with open source security software like firewalls, IDS, IPS, incident detection and response, and cloud security. Rodrigo is also an author of two patents in the detection field, one to discover malicious digital documents, and the other one is around analyzing malicious HTTP traffic. Rodrigo, it's wonderful to have you in the show. For our viewers who may not know you, do you want to briefly share about your journey?
Oh, sure. Thank you for having me here, Puru. It's a pleasure to be here. And like, I'm a Brazilian guy. I live here in the south of Brazil. I live in a place like, I have a place here like Floripa. It's Florianópolis, is the capital of Santa Catarina State. And I like in the last like 22, maybe 25 years, I'm working with computer stuff like technology mostly. I start like in most of I think of my age like with sysadmin, like working on on providers, internet providers, and managing the infrastructure. And so I start to move to security, and so they moved me to security. And so after some time, I move it to research, because I'm a kind of guy that I like to understand the stuff really in deep. And after that, like the last 3 years, maybe 3 years, something like that, I'm just most of my time I'm playing with the AWS security, like start to studying, understanding, discovering something, in this kind of stuff.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, we are excited for the discussion. So the way we do the podcast is we have two sections. The first section is focused on the security questions, and the second one, the fun one, is the rapid fire. So
Okay.
let's start with the security questions. So when it comes to like threat detection or threat research, there are many areas, right? There is bug bounty programs, there are pen tests, there is vulnerability research, threat research, etc. So when it comes to cloud, let's say maybe we stick to AWS for now, right? What areas does your work cover?
Okay. What I mostly work, let's say, on the blue team side, right? And so and at Clavis currently mostly we have a security operations center, and so our main goal is to create detection. And to create detection means I need to understand the AWS ecosystem, see how stuff works, see how an attacker could take some path, and path I means like the actions that they could use this action plus these actions plus these actions, so it will get access to something. And
Mm-hmm.
I used to to study and research like mostly like what I used to call uncommon service, like what is considered uncommon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Service that, because like we're talking about like around 300 servers for AWS, and so there is a
Correct.
amount of opportunities, and there is
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of research on some specific servers. If you look like for S3, for EC2, for Lambda, or this kind of service, there is a bunch of research, people trying to abuse. And what I
Mm-hmm.
try to do is to look through service that's not very well known or not
Mm-hmm.
very well used around the world,
Mm-hmm.
and try to figure out like if the company use this service, what could I get from here to get the data? Like, because the data mostly will be in the same place, but I just try to figure out different paths. And so most of the time I try to understand like what I'm testing, I'm clicking, I'm trying to see what's being generated, what's missing, and this kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. So most of the time that's like what I do, like when I do the research. I try to build the paths, the possible paths
Mm-hmm.
in different in different servers, and see like
Mm-hmm.
what I can get from there. Like, and when I get something, I try to share.
Okay, that's very interesting because generally folks focus on the common services, right? Like S3s or EC2s, but you are taking a different approach that you're focusing on uncommon ones because that's where you'll have very less documentation, even from the cloud provider's perspective and also in general, right? Um, the the follow up question on that would be how is it different than, let's say, the regular red teaming or blue teaming activities that is performed?
Okay, well, like everything started. I was doing this, so I talked to Ashish like in person. We were talking like in some conference,
Mm-hmm.
and I started to figure out like, because I was very excited with the current tools and detections that we have around. And so when
Mm-hmm.
I talked to him, and he that brought this word uncommon service to my mind, and
Okay.
I started to figure out, okay, like I was analyzing. I used to play with Cloudsploit, is one of open source CSPM, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I started to figure out, okay, I'm finding a lot of stuff using Cloudsploit, like misconfiguration and so on. But if I look in the number of servers that they are covering, we are talking something about like almost 100 servers. And we have 300 servers. And so like most
Correct.
of the servers we're not looking for. And so that's why I start to look on this, or try this kind of approach. Like, let's see, like, okay, let's be like more pessimist, like, and see like the other part that nobody is looking for, because probably there is some opportunities, maybe not, but maybe yes. And talking about the red team and the blue team part, I think like
Mm-hmm.
most of the time the red team is something more like, I'm talking about based on my concept or red team and blue team, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
the red team for me is something more strategic. Like, I'm not trying to find a SQL injection in your application. I'm not trying to see if you have some vulnerability. What I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing is I'm going to test some scenario or some techniques or some steps, and see like
Mm-hmm.
if my defense, my blue team are going to detect, right? And
Okay.
so it's something that, in my opinion, is something that's privileged. I already know about that. I know how to attack. I know that it's some, if I'm success here, I need to detect here. And what
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to do with my research is, I used to say that in the blue team side, we use it to be more responsive about the offensive research. Like, they discover
Mm-hmm.
something, we try to detect, we try to block, we try to mitigate,
Mm-hmm.
this kind of thing. And so I used to say that my research are kind of making blue team more proactive. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to figure out the paths to create the detections before somebody else do that. And those
Huh?
that's a
Yeah,
kind of,
somebody outsider, someone outsider
yeah,
takes advantage of it, right? Yeah.
exactly. And so, and that's I think that's my approach. Like I'm trying to be more blue team active, like on a proactive way, instead of response. Do I respond to someone else
Mm-hmm.
research? I try to do this part of research, because the nice about AWS, like by the end, like doesn't matter the way the attacker are coming. Like when they try
Mm-hmm.
to execute something, it will be logged in the same way. Like they probably
Correct.
have much more ideas about the way they are going to attack me, but by the end, the action is the same. So
Mm.
I try to figure
Right,
out
right.
which actions, and try to create detections.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And so, speaking of, like you mentioned about this a couple of times, right? When it comes to AWS, there are many services. So each cloud provider has like published a shared responsibility model, right? And
Yes.
as part of that, they cover some of the areas from even from a security perspective, like the core infrastructure, hardware or network. As a customer, let's say I'm trying to deploy my workloads, and I'm responsible for my security of those areas, right?
Yes.
The threat research that you do, does it apply to both the like cloud providers capabilities and also the customers workloads, or it's just focusing on the customers workloads?
Oh, most of my research are based on the functionalities, the features of the provider itself. I don't have any
Okay.
research like some researchers they do some cross tenant part, right? I'm using my
Mm-hmm.
service here, and I didn't have this kind of research. And what I have about the share responsibility model, it's something that I really take a look. I have a research that I did a presentation last year. It's the
Mm-hmm.
full no? The full truth of
Mm-hmm.
AWS share responsibility model. It's where I try to point like there is a bunch of improvements that AWS developed like from the last years, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not enabled by default, and that's the point. And so you need to know to understand that like it's not AWS fault, but it's
Right.
the default. And so you
Mm-hmm.
as a customer, and the part of your responsibility is to know that, and so you could mitigate this kind of problems and improve your security. The kinds for example, like the S3 buckets, for example. S3 buckets,
Mm-hmm.
there is a bunch of leaks, and these sort of leaks are start with S3 open to everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they released like in the past, I don't remember when. There is
Mm-hmm.
like now you have a flag that this flag I will block the possibility of these buckets become public. Like you could
Correct.
came with
Correct.
a policy, or but like until now it's disabled by default, this flag. And so like if you're using
Right.
Terraform, for example, it's disabled. And
Mm-hmm.
so a
Mm-hmm.
guy could make your buckets public because it's disabled. And
Correct.
now they, at least
Correct.
for this, they are moving to this enable by default like in April. That's cool. That's part of cool. But there is a
Right.
bunch
Right.
of small details in any service that you need to fix. And this kind
Mm-hmm.
of things it's really important to know. Like I'm not, as I said, like I'm not saying that's the AWS fault, but since it's not enabled by default, you like customer must understand that.
Yeah. So it makes sense that each capability comes with some default options enabled. It's your responsibility how, based on your workloads, you change the defaults to be more secure. So uh, one of the things that you highlighted multiple times is that AWS has, let's say, around 300 services, right? How do you
Yes.
sort of how do you decide which one to pick, and how do you prioritize those services as part of your threat research?
Okay, that's a good question. When I start this kind of approach, everything started
Mm-hmm.
with some needs or some read or something you see around. Like
Mm-hmm.
I start with AppStream. Like the very first service I start to look for was AWS AppStream. And why I
Mm-hmm.
start with AppStream? Because I was in a call with not it wasn't a customer, it was a company calling to my company about an
Mm-hmm.
incident problem. And they mentioned, oh, we had a problem with our AppStream,
Mm-hmm.
and they like because they have a role attached, the administrator role attached, and one of them was the I started to figure out like what the heck is AppStream? So it's something that it's something that they installed that EC2 instance, and so I started
Mm-hmm.
to figure out, say, oh my god, it's a service. And so I started saying, okay, I understand how it works. So because like my very first thing was like, oh, if they are our customer, we're probably not detecting because you have none for AppStream. And so I started
Right. Right.
to look, understand the actions, play, and do all the things. And so this is a kind of uh, path that I start with AppStream. But I
Mm-hmm.
like two ways now. First, we used to map the service because we have a bunch of CloudTrail coming to our security operations center, and there is
Right.
a variable called event source, and so we
Mm-hmm.
try to see the service that most of our customers are using. So if there are some
Okay.
possibilities about create detection and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
there is a nice research from Noah from Hermetic, and that
Mm-hmm.
he talks a lot about pass role, because
Okay.
like when an action has a pass role, it probably could be more dangerous because we're talking about
Right.
permissions related and this kind of thing. And so there is like but I think like almost 100 service probably has actions that has pass role,
Mm-hmm.
and pass role is not logged. Like there is no event name called pass role. Like, and so
Right.
this kind
Right.
of thing. And so I really like the list that they release, because there is a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of actions and the opportunities. And my app stream is there. The app
Oh,
stream
okay.
that actions that I researched is there, but it was
Mm-hmm.
coincidence. Like I started because of the call, and when I saw the NOAA research, I think, oh,
Mm-hmm.
it's here. So that's a good point to start, because everything that has permissions related attached, it probably could
Correct.
be dangerous, because yeah,
Mm-hmm.
permission is a huge problem for everybody.
Mm-hmm. So I think you highlighted two things which were key, right? One is always like you go based on which services are getting used, and based on that you prioritize. And the other thing that you highlighted is that you have enabled sort of CloudTrail logs so that you get notified into the your SOC system. You know which services are getting used, and you are also looking around other research so that you can learn what type of logging should be captured, so that that helps you with the prioritization as well. So that makes a lot of sense. So I, now I'm just trying to think. Let's say I'm a user of, let's say, AWS, and I'm
Okay.
trying to build and deploy workloads. So as part of the building phase or design phase, we spend a lot of time on architecture to hash out the capabilities of the services, and also how do they interact between each other. How should organizations think, uh, and what stage should they think about security when they are doing the architecture?
Okay, yeah, that's a hard question to answer. To be something like, I think there is no receipt, right? There is no
Mm-hmm.
magical receipt. What I like the for me the perfect perspective. Like I like to think about the threat modeling. Like you need to understand like where is your attacker, where
Mm-hmm.
is your data or your information that need to be protected, and the
Mm-hmm.
path like from the point A to the point B. And
Mm-hmm.
in this path, like we're talking about like could be something on premise, could be something based on cloud, could be something
Mm-hmm.
based on application with a flaw, because sometimes like they don't need to find a flaw at the the cloud provider. They could like get the information using different stuff. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
all about the but based on the threat modeling, I think like you have a lot of opportunities like for prevention, guardrails, detections, monitoring, this kind of things. And based on that, I would build something that I call like, okay, what are the quick wins? Like what's something easier for me? Like I have almost ready to go, and I just
Mm-hmm.
do in a few time because something is pretty trivial. For example, like if you never run a CSPM, it's pretty trivial
Mm-hmm.
to use something like an open source, like to start,
Mm-hmm.
and you run and you find a lot of misconfiguration, like you have
Right.
like a lot of stuff to do, and some misconfiguration are pretty easy to fix, some are not too easy. And the
Mm-hmm.
second problem is about the permissions, right? The permission is really really important to have the least privilege, so when something
Mm-hmm.
leaks, and the danger is not that big. Like if you have less
Mm-hmm.
permission, like it's going to be a problem, right? But
Mm-hmm.
by the end, like as championships, right? The usually they say defense wins
Mm-hmm.
championships and offense win games. And so like
Right.
they could maybe get the first access, but if the attacker didn't get the information that you're trying to protect, you lose the game, but you win the championship, right? And so
Right.
I think that's mostly, I think that's how the I would try to work. I think for
Okay.
AWS, there is something at AWS that I think everybody should use. That's my opinion, right? But there is the conditionals, like when. All right, let's come back a bit. When we
Mm-hmm.
have like the permissions, right? We have like almost
Right.
14 actions split on those
Mm-hmm.
300 service something. And the
Right.
permissions are split in five different access level. That you have the
Right.
read, the list, the read, the list, the tagging, and so you have the permissions management,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the write. And so
Correct.
in my conception, everything that has permissions management and write, you should have a conditional. And I think the easiest conditional, and it's where it's very effective, it's like the IP source. And so like you could use this key with this policy, like, but you should be from my VPN or from my Bastion host or somewhere else, because like if the key is leaked, because the key will leak sometimes, right? And if the key leaks, you at least they could not use that, because
Correct.
like they need to be from that source IP, and so like you lose
Mm-hmm.
the game, but you win the championship because they are not going to use. And so I think there is a lot of small tricks, in my opinion, that
Mm-hmm.
it's not difficult to apply and could save a lot of problems that you're probably going to solve. But I think,
That's a great framework, actually. That's a great framework that wherever there is high impact permissions you're assigning, like permission management or rights, you should always have some sort of restriction. As you highlighted,
yes.
right? Maybe IP or VPN or something like that, so that you know that even though attacker gets access to the access key or something like that, they are sort of restricted to a particular set of
Yeah,
IPs.
because there is like some small details. For example, small details that I used to say a lot. For example, MFA, right?
Mm-hmm.
You create your user there, Puru, and give Puru administrator access. When you go
Right.
to the console, you log in and you ask the password, and so the MFA, and boom, you're logged and so on. So you create a key because, like, most of the time you're using Terraform or some tools or something else.
Right.
But but the key, what is user leaks? It's not the user and pass, it's the key. But
Correct.
the MFA is enabled just to the console, web console. The key is not using MFA, and so there is a bunch of small details that could improve a lot your security. Just
Mm-hmm.
understand the defaults, because like a lot of people that I explain that, they say, but I use MFA. But MFA is just for the console. The key there is no
Right.
MFA, because you need to do the conditional asking for MFA, And so you need to run the command for the STS endpoint, and so you bring back the Asia key, the temporary key, when you type the correct MFA. But nobody do that. So no, not nobody. Most of people doesn't
Most
know,
of the folks.
and yeah, and so they don't do that. And so like if you improve like IP servers and MFA, like it's a big chance like your key are not going to be used anywhere. Right? So but
Hmm.
okay, there is service.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that you could not do that maybe, but there is another conditional stuff like that. But yes, I think it's a cheap, easy way to kind of create some protection for you. And so after that, you start with CSPM, IAM permission. The monitoring part, like it's easier because you just need to grab the information and have the detections, right? And so it don't depends
Right.
on other people work.
Mhm.
But that's it. I think that's the three areas: threat modeling, restrictions, and this kind of things.
Yeah, yeah. So I really liked those two, like the restrictions part, the conditional permissions, and the threat modeling. Rather than just looking at what permissions you are providing to maybe one service, look at the entire attack path or the threat modeling for that service, which can help you prepare in a better way,
And
right?
and
Uh,
there
so,
is a company just a bit. There is a company I think it's Trust on Cloud. They release like some
mhm.
public S3 threat modeling just for S3 service, and this specific it has like 106 page like just for S3. Like
Yeah,
I'm not going like you don't need to be that paranoid for the first
yeah.
instance,
Mhm.
but you need to understand that there is a bunch of opportunities for stuff like that.
Right, right. So the scale is way too big than what you can imagine, right? Like just for S3, there are 100 pages for threat modeling. Then
Yeah,
imagine for 300 services, right?
because everything's connected, and it's pretty hard.
Correct.
I'm developed a training here, and I was looking like for the networking part, like because we're talking like the control plane part. I have action, I attach a administrator access, I elevate my privilege, these kind of things. We're talking about that. But there is some ways like these actions could open paths like on the network side. And I was looking
Right.
for VIP for peering, for example, VIPC peering.
Mm-hmm.
And so I grab all the VIPC the actions or grip doing grab for gripping for
Mm-hmm.
peering. And so I saw that game lift that I have no idea what game lift does. It's here like on my tabs to be analyzed, but
Mm-hmm.
it has the same action like create a peering with a VPC. And so I figured out, oh,
Okay.
maybe I could like from game lift create a peering with another cross account or maybe or another VPC inside, and so move
Mm-hmm.
to the other side. And so an action that I'm probably not looking for. Like if I look game
Right, right.
lift on my cloud trail, say, oh, what's going on? I have no idea. I probably never look for that. And so like there is too much integrations and some details that probably could like take like someone else to. I didn't test that. I'm just saying what I saw like 2 days ago. Like it's in my mind
Mm-hmm.
to take a look, but I need to stop and figure out like. And so this game list is the kind of uncommon service for me. Like I probably if I ask
Right,
to a
right.
bunch of friends who is using game lift, nobody is will raise the hands because they,
No, that absolutely goes to your philosophy of looking at uncommon services, right? Because maybe nobody uses it, but it still has a vulnerability through which you can get to the data, right? So
yeah.
one of the things that, as you pointed out, right, like attackers try to exploit some vulnerability somewhere so that they can get into your cloud environment and start getting access to the data, right? And one of the long-standing and popular vulnerabilities is the EC2 instances, which has IMDS v1 enabled, which gets exploited quite a bit. And I think the V2 was released sometime in 2020. So, can you share like what IMDS V1 is and how do attackers exploit, and how can we address that? Like, and why is it taking time and stuff like that?
Well, that's a good point. That's one of like when I was talking about the default truth. That's one of the points. Like AWS
Mm-hmm.
create the metadata v2 to protect for server-side request forgery attacks. Like mostly, I think
Right.
because of the Capital One case, like it was implemented, like because the attacker. What is metadata? Metadata, it's that's crazy IP like 169.254, 169.254, 254 that that cache a bunch of information about where the security group, the AMI you're using, this kind of things. And when you attach a role to the instance, the credentials of the role are cached there too. And so if you are from the instance, you could access that and grab that information. And that's what's happened with Capital One, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
a web WAF there that they could do the service request forgery, modify the host header, and so have access to the metadata and grab the keys and use it. For example, if like you have like some restriction, like I could grab the keys, but I could not use the keys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And after that, like they probably because of this they released the metadata v2, and so the
Mm-hmm.
metadata v2 like you're not just pointed to the that IP and the path of the you just you need to get a token, modify more headers, and so like if you have a flaw in your application, it's a service request forger probably could not abuse that, but
Mm-hmm.
it's disabled by default. Like if you go creating instance, by default it's use the metadata v1. And so as the I was talking like
Mm-hmm.
before, like the solution is there. They have something that's more secure that could improve your security. It's not more security. To improve your security, if you have an initial
Right.
problem, it's going to protect you from depend like you talked about the application. If I have access to the shell of the machine, it's the same. Like it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
I could abuse in the same way, but it's disabled by default. And so what you're going to do? That's kind of check that CSPM has, for example, like, oh, you
Right.
have a bunch of instances. The instance, because there is a field there that, oh, I forgot the name of the field, but it's if the token, I think required
Mm-hmm.
token, something like that, it's optional or required. If it, on the
Right.
describe of the is optional, it's because you're
Mm-hmm.
using metadata v1. If it because
Right.
required because you're using, and so you could just go there and uh, and and find the instance that is not working. You could go there and enable the
V2.
metadata v2. And the
Mm-hmm.
best way to avoid like creating machines, you could create
Mm-hmm.
a service control policy on the organization level that deny like a machine being created using not using the metadata v2, but by default like it's metadata v1.
Hmm. Okay, um, that's a very good advice, right? Where maybe leverage SCP to restrict, because by default
Yes.
AWS doesn't enforce that. So that's one way to secure your workloads,
Yeah,
your compute
yeah.
instances.
I think like the best way like is to prevent, like, because like if you
Mm-hmm.
depend everybody else trust everybody else that they are changing the automations kind of thing, it's probably not going to work. And the second, like
Yeah.
you could like at the cloud trail, when you have the run instance part, you have that
Mm-hmm.
information that metadata one or two is being used, and so you could trigger alert
Mm-hmm.
that something is not on compliance. But that's more reactive, right? No, the best is the prevention, like, because
Yeah.
I don't see any reason to use metadata v1 instead of v2.
Makes sense. So I have one question on how you do your work, right? Like there are many open source threat research related platforms like sad cloud you highlighted, this cloud code or hack the box or cic don't, etc. Do you use any of them for your research, or like do you have any favorite tool that you use for your research work?
Well, the way I do my research, like since I'm trying to find new stuff, like different ways, like most of things are not there. I like to
Mhm.
use I use a lot Cloud Goats. I like Cloud Goats a lot because I like to explain like how to abuse like why, because one of the problems with the markets, like they sometimes they have no idea like how dangerous or is that misconfiguration, or that
Right.
that permissions excessive permission, because it's something, it's new to everybody, right? It's new, it's
Mhm.
something newer. And so like, oh, you have metadata v1, or so the attacker, they have no idea. But when you
Mhm.
configure cloud gold showing like the ssr bridge, and so like from
Mhm.
here I came to here, I pivot to the control plane, and so I could now, like, because you did like two permissive this role, I could mend your control plane, I could access your data,
Right.
this kind of thing. And so it helps a lot, like for analysts, for and to generate the information to say, oh, that's why we're looking for this action, or this actions plus this action, this kind of behavior.
Mhm.
And so I really like this kind of. There is a nice tool from, I think Set Cloud is from Bishop
Mhm.
Fox, B Fox Shop. I forgot the name, but there is I'm vulnerable. I am vulnerable. That's
Oh,
create
okay.
like I am bad practice, and so that's pretty interesting too.
Okay. So what we'll do is
But
we'll tag the repo as well when we publish this video, so that our viewers can also go to that and use that for their own threat detection.
okay,
But yeah, you were
that's good.
saying something.
No, but yes, but on most of my times, what I'm trying to do is like, let's try to see the uncommon service, and so maybe in
Mhm.
future could becomes part of this, but for now it is not part of this. I was looking for, I'm always looking for something, and when I look to something, I try to figure out like, oh, how can I abuse that? That's this kind of thing. And so I was looking for roles anywhere from IAM, like, so that's
Mhm.
something not that new, but it's new. And so I just
Right.
discovered, like, you're used to look like, oh, they are trying to do the privilege escalation. They will attach user policy, attach role policy, because like I could attach some policy different. And so I saw like the roles anywhere, they have a update profile that you update the, seems like, because I'm just read like this morning, like seems like you
Mhm.
update the permissions of the role. And so like, it's another privilege escalation point. Like, yeah, I'm not
Right.
looking
Right.
for. I need to create some
Right.
detection. Like the same for SSO, identity center. Like when
Mhm.
you're doing the privilege escalation at the identity center, you're not looking for attached user policy or something like that. You have the permission, add permission set. I don't know exactly the name,
Right.
but it's
Right.
another different actions. Like, so it's like there is
Right.
a bunch of things that do the same problem, and we're probably not looking because it's not that common. But
Right.
yes,
Yeah.
that that's it.
No, that makes sense, and I think you highlighted a key point here is that IAM, and when it comes to identity center, they are sort of handled slightly different, because there is permission set and all of that defined, and then they also map to IAM policies, so it makes it even more complicated. So the library that you highlighted, right, the IAM vulnerabilities one, that maybe our viewers can use that to analyze some of that
Yeah, yeah,
data.
that's more to play to understand. I think like my best advice is always start an account, add a budget alert, like to make sure that you're not going to pay like $1,000 bill,
Right.
and you start to click. There's a bunch of free tiers, a bunch of trials. You could like, that's the best. Like, read the base, the theory, and so go to practical. Like, and I think the best way to learn.
Makes sense. That's a very good advice. And that's a great way to end the questions section as well. Here are a few important points that stood out from this discussion. First one is, before using any new service or thinking about any new service, thinking about security for any new service, cloud practitioners should do threat modeling exercise to understand the attack paths, because that helps in defining the right set of permissions policies for the service. Second one is to limit impact of any attacks. Always apply restrictions on high impact permissions, like write or put permissions in the IAM policies. And for that, you can use conditional clause, like conditions clause, where you can restrict is to a VPN IPs or your particular IPs or IP certs. The third one is for IMDS v1 vulnerability, define policies in SCP to disable creation of any new EC2 instances with IMDS v1 enabled. Let's go to the rapid fire section. Uh,
Okay.
the first question that we have is, what advice would you give to your 25-year-old self starting in security?
Oh, I think like I'm. I used to like to understand things, and that's the kind of advice that I give to most people. And I think I maybe could try to do better. Like stood the base, like stood the base
Mhm.
of things, like stood the operation system, stood the protocols, understands how thing works, and this kind of things, and so move to something else. Like do some. I think if because like currently I think like people are they are want to get on the top like too fast, and I think like if you work stud the basics, you work like developer or system administrator, like DevOps now, not the different name, it's kind of thing. You get the basics, you get the basic, and so your base will be so very well structured, and so like you could put a
Mhm.
lot of information on top of that pretty easy, and so like you'll be a better security guy, you'll be a better DevOps guy, a better code review guy, or this kind of thing. And so like if I could add something like 25 years ago for me to be stood more the basics. I used to
So
study a
get your
lot, but
basics right.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I know the basics.
Mhm. Makes sense. The next question is a one liner quote that keeps you going.
I like I think it's from Linus Torvalds from Linux,
Hmm.
and once he said like less talk, more action. So and so I
Oh,
like
nice.
that. Let's do more things and not just talk about things, and because like and there is talk sheep show me the code, right? And so and I think
Hmm.
like less talk more action is something that I really like, because like the road is full of good ideas, but if you don't pick one and try to do that, it's just ideas, right?
Yeah, execute in a way, right? That's very
Yes.
valid. Uh, the third one is, what's the biggest lie you have heard in cybersecurity?
Oh, it's secure by default.
Yeah, that's
Well,
very
yeah,
much in
yeah.
line with the theme of the episode as well, right?
Yeah, because because I heard like I was in a conference like, and there is a research from Microsoft that time, and why are you moving to cloud? Oh, I'm moving to cloud because it's more secure. Oh wait, it's not true. It could be more, because I think there is there is like the it could be like more secure than ever if you understand, because like you have more control about everything. It's
Hmm.
everything API based, and so you could control and know everything that's going on. But if you don't know, like you have the old problems, because you have patch problems, you have code problems, you have all these things, and you have a bunch of new problems. Like you have the control plane, you have the logs disabled by the service by default, and so like it's like much less secure. Like if you don't really know, and so I
Hmm.
think this approach, like oh, it's more secure, it's better, this kind of thing that like the vendor speech most of the time that's terrible.
Yeah, no, you are absolutely spot on, right? Most of the folks think that we move to cloud and we are secure, but that's not the case, right? You have all these bells and whistles that you have to go through to make sure that you are secure.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I think you could be like as secure as you probably never be on premise, but you need
Hmm.
to really understand, really manage. You have all the a nice team, like all the things, like. But
Yeah, yeah. Makes
That's
sense.
it.
So yeah, that's a great way to end the episode. Thank you so much, Rodrigo. It was very insightful. I could learn few things from the episode as well, and I'm hoping our viewers will learn something as well from this. So thanks for coming to the show.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me here. That's a pleasure.
And to our viewers, thanks for watching. Hope you have learned something new. If you have any questions around security, share those at scale20.com. We'll get those answered by an expert in the security space. See you in the next episode. Thank you.